Podcasting has gone from niche to necessary, and the data shows we're only scratching the surface of what's possible for advertisers. To guide us through the latest trends, please welcome Pete Birsinger of Podscribe and Bob Hunt of Hearts and Science for a data-packed, insight-filled tour of where podcast advertising is headed next. Pete and Bob, the stage, it's yours.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for everybody who is joining in on the web or downstairs. So today, Bob came up a little bit early, but he can join.
They told me to come up, so
yeah. So today we're going to go through a whirlwind tour of the most powerful trends shaping podcasting, and for that, we're going to look at a lot of data that we Podscribe have from the billions of impressions that we track each quarter. Quickly, who am I? So I'm Pete Birsinger, the founder and CEO of Podscribe. Podscribe, we are the leading measurement platform in podcasting. So we help you turn data into real, actionable insights. Quickly, just to get a show of hands in the audience, who here has used either on the buy side or sell side pixel-based measurement? Wow. So a pretty good percent of the audience. So later today, Cam on our team is going to be talking about why podcasting is actually the most measurable medium. Some people think it may have a measurement problem, but we think actually due to its unique open nature that it is actually more measurable in many instances than other channels. So that'll be Cam later today, but for me, what I'm going to talk about today is data and the trends behind what is happening in the podcast world. First off, we have video. I think everybody here is thinking about video, YouTube, Spotify video, what is going on there. If we look at the data here, what we see is a yellow line going up and to the right. And what this graph represents is what percent of simulcast campaign, or what percent of episodic buys that we have tracked in the past year that are simulcast, that have both an audio component on the RSS feed and a YouTube view component as well. We all know creators are posting more to their episodes, both to their audio RSS feed and to their YouTube channel, but what this shows as well is that advertisers, you folks here, are buying them as well. And so roughly now, if you're doing an episodic buy, probably about 3 out of 4 of your episodic buys, you will get both audio downloads and YouTube views, which is great, wider reach. You're being on more platforms than ever before. However, this poses a problem, the measurement problem, because with podcasting, because of its open nature, we can pixel it. We can get the IP address of listeners, match those to website visitors or purchasers, and it's a huge advantage. YouTube, on the other hand, is a closed ecosystem where we don't quite have that data. So historically, we've modeled performance on YouTube views from the performance of the same ad and episode on audio. We've assumed their performance is roughly equal, but recently we've been working to try to figure out, are YouTube views and their performance roughly equal to audio downloads? So with one more poll, this will be the last one, but if you guys in the audience, if you could have 100 YouTube views, or you could have 100 podcast downloads, and your goal was to drive website purchases, raise your hand if you would take 100 YouTube views. A minority, for sure. Okay, and raise your hand if you would take 100 podcast downloads to drive those website purchases. All right, I think probably like 70-30 podcast downloads. Okay, that's interesting. So doing a quick sneak peek of a case study that we worked on with Oxford Road that will be coming out shortly. You can scan the QR code to get a white paper. Kudos to everybody who said the audio downloads. From what it seems from an early analysis that is by no means conclusive. What we do see from looking at promo codes and survey data, we do see that podcast downloads are a decent amount more effective than YouTube views. Roughly, you can think of it where if the same amount for those 100 podcast downloads, or say you have some number of podcast downloads, if they drive 100 website purchases, you can expect roughly the same number of YouTube views to drive about 66 website purchases, the same number of YouTube views. So I think there's more data that can definitely come out later and will definitely be helpful, but we're essentially trying to get around a bit. We're trying to figure out how we can give more info and precision to the YouTube measurement scene in lieu of a pixel, which would be the ideal, and I think we're all working on it, but yeah, so that's what we have now. Another trend, the growth of audience buying in podcasting. Podcasting grew up and began with advertisers buying on a single show, a host-read ad on a single show. However, this is changing. As you can see in the past year, what we're plotting here is the growth of audience buying, of campaigns that we have tracked that are not on a specific show, that are either run of network, sold by a network, programmatic. So this is a natural, I think, evolution of the industry. It shows how advertisers are having more options. They're having more targeting ability than ever before. And I think with that, our role is to be able to provide more precise measurement than ever before for any audience segment or app or device or geo that you can target on. You need precise measurement for that. And you can see in the purple, the light purple there, that is programmatic. So programmatic, we consider a subset of audience buying, and it is climbing significantly as well. So that's definitely worth noting. I think a lot more options are becoming available quickly with that. Podcasting is also going global. Many of you here are perhaps already buying internationally. The podcast scene around the world is exploding. One challenge that we see that buyers looking to go global or are going global face is, how do I measure my campaign? How do I measure my campaigns internationally? What about GDPR? What about, do they allow pixels in Brazilian ad servers? The answer is, fortunately, generally, pretty much everywhere we're allowed to track. I'd say Europe is a challenge with GDPR. IPs churn more regularly there. We don't yet have a device graph in Europe. The options are just not as good with GDPR. But what we show here, we just put a quick sample of the visit rates per country in Europe. And the point is that measurement is still possible, and by and large, you can still do an apples-to-apples comparison across the globe, such that measurement, we've seen it shouldn't be an obstacle for your international expansion. Oops, backwards. Also, ad load is rising. I think we're up to we just cracked 10% at least according to Q2 data. So that means if there are 100 minutes in a podcast, about 10 of them are ads right now on average. I think this is just a natural state of a maturing industry. But it is worth keeping in mind, and I think, as was noted in earlier presentations, audio and podcasts are a huge, perhaps I think maybe even the biggest part of how users spend their day. And relative to other platforms, audio is still incredibly under-monetized. I don't think this means that podcast ad load can increase by 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more to be 100% of the show, but I do think it means that more brands could come in, targeting could improve, measurement could also improve, of course. So I think there's still a long way to go in the maturing and monetization of the industry, at least relative to other channels and how it's being monetized now. One data point we did want to put in here for how to navigate rising ad load is which ads may be more resilient to a higher ad load. On the right, we see producer-read ads. And what we see in our data is as the ad load increases, the performance drops off faster for producer-read ads. and this is the purchase rate. So what percent of impressions lead to a purchase? Contrast that with host-read ads there on the left in yellow, which are fairly resilient, as you can see, to a higher ad load. And this is exciting because I think it speaks to the promise of quality host-read ads that the audience does not feel like are in just another commercial or are not a commercial break to skip. So it's important to keep in mind that podcasters can still present a brand's message in a way that the audience doesn't feel like they need to skip through in many cases. All right, last slide before I loop Bob in here. So earlier this year, we also released a reach curve. I'm not sure, but we believe it was the first ever podcast reach curve. And the purpose of it was to say what number of monthly impressions you need to reach whatever percent of the population or however many millions of people you're aiming to reach. That is in the yellow there, where by our data, at least with about 1 billion impressions, you can hit roughly 120 million US podcast listeners, more or less all of them. We're not aware of anybody who's doing quite that volume, so everybody still has some room to grow. And what we did here most recently is we added in streaming audio and combined them. So streaming audio there in the purple, we see has a little bit more scale. With roughly 1 billion impressions, you can get maybe about 150 million unique listeners. But where the magic really happens actually is when you combine them. Surprisingly to me, the audiences are a lot more unique than I perhaps had thought originally. When we look at most advertisers' data, they're often roughly 80% distinct, not overlapping, which is, I thought our data was wrong at first. I don't think it is. So what we see then is when you actually combine them is you get a lot of incremental reach, and together with just podcasting and streaming audio, you can hit up to 85% or more of the US adult population. So, all right, that's enough from me. So I want to welcome Bob Hunt, a friend and a force in the audio industry. Welcome, Bob.
Yeah.
Could we get a...
Good to be here.
Yeah. So, all right, well, thank you for joining, Bob.
It's good to be here. It's also great to see a lot of faces here, a lot of the same folks, but a lot of new ones as well. And it's like, obviously, one thing I always try to say with podcasting is everybody in podcasting is super passionate about it, right? I would say compared to other channels I work on, and but also they really want you to learn, right? And so I think it's a very welcoming collegial group of folks, which is a lot of fun.
Well, tell the audience here how long you've been in podcasting and your experience.
Yeah, so I think I've been at Hearts, part of Omnicom, since 2016. And around like 2018, 2019, I've always been interested in audio. I worked partially, worked at a radio station when I was in college. I briefly worked at education when I was in high school. And I was really interested in podcasting before I even knew it was podcasting, right? And Hearts being a relatively new agency at the time, I went to my bosses and said like, hey, like this is a growing area. I think we should invest in it. And one thing that's been really fun about working at Hearts is if you convince clients to buy onto it, you can go out and do it versus maybe some bigger agencies that have been around for a long time. Hey, someone's been doing this we've always have someone doing this or that or whatever. And so I think we're really able to grow. And I think podcasting in particular is a very entrepreneurial spirit. And I think been able to take that with the agency and grow the group and grow the practice. And it's really fun that when I first pitched this as an idea, I would say the market was like maybe like $500 million in the US, right? And now seeing the numbers from that close to $3 billion. I mean, that's 6x, which is pretty cool to see. So.
Totally. Yeah. So it sounds like it's not exactly your first rodeo here. So of some of the trends that I was talking about or others that you've seen, what have been the most noteworthy things shaping your buying experience in the past 2 years or year?
Yeah, so I think obviously two key things, right? First, I obviously talk about the growth of video, right? And obviously we're all kind of discussing like what is a podcast, right? And that formal definition. I think a couple things that are really key. One, still being centered in audio, right? If you look at even like half of YouTube consumption, a lot of people are still like having it on as a separate browser tab, right? Or something of that sort, or having the phone on going somewhere else. So it is truly still an audio-centric platform, even though people do definitely consume the video, right? Another thing is the openness of it. And so, people ask, like, oh, if it's just a straight YouTube show, is it a podcast? Obviously, there's a lot of podcast consumption on YouTube, but I think one thing that has made podcasting really special is really the community and the connectiveness of everyone around it, right? And I think that's something where people are actively choosing to consume that content, which really does make the RSS side of things really, really powerful. But also just how it's open. It's not, hey, not just one algorithm, one platform choosing to show me one piece of content or another. It's people actively choosing to consume that content, which I think you see it just if you go to, think of how many podcasts have live shows where you have, audiences just like this all over the country. People just literally just going to see people talk just like this, right? I don't think that happens other part of kind of the short form creator space. So I think that's something that's really special. And I think also when we think about podcasting and audio and the changing of it, making sure like we focus on what makes us special as a group, right? There's a lot of content out there. It's growing every day, more platforms. It's like, hey, where can we win as an industry versus other parts of the advertising and media ecosystem?
Right. So I think somebody said earlier, lean in medium, as you're saying. So you did hit on an interesting point on the definition of a podcast, how there can be the general definition of sort of any conversation anywhere could count as a podcast, and maybe that's how listeners today and creators could view it. And I think you brought up the point, well, does that include pure YouTube buys? Because I think one of the challenges that I see, and you would probably know better, is internally most buyers that I'm aware of put pure YouTube buys and like their influencer team, whereas the podcast buys, mostly if they have an RSS feed, are on another team. So how do you suggest the industry should navigate those two competing definitions? And should an RSS feed or some notion of being open, the platform allowing the logs to be shared, play into this?
I think for us, we're always trying to compete with search, social, and video, right? The other parts of the digital ecosystem. And I think it comes down to a lot of times broader clients. If you think of like the proverbial pie chart, of like, hey, between search, social, video, not just audio, now increasingly influencer or retail media or stuff of that sort, making sure we have things that can really grow, particularly as part of like marketing mix models, right? And make sure it's truly defined as kind of the audio podcasting bucket. And I think if things really do sit within YouTube, increasingly it is just broadly speaking like video, right? Because obviously there's a pretty big, Google, demand gen, AdSense, like Google, ecosystem, right? And like, are we going to compete with that or not? I think that's a little bit more of a challenge, right? I mean, every client and every agency is going to have a different setup of what they consider to be, influencer or not, right? Yeah.
Do you think if YouTube were to allow measurement for these baked-in ads in some form, how much money or revenue do you think that would bring into, I guess, them, creators, advertisers in terms of ROI, and would that let more buyers shift pure YouTube into actual podcasting, do you think?
I mean, obviously, if we're trying to compete with search, social, and video, right, a lot of that ecosystem has full tracking. Right, and so if we are in a situation where all of our buys have full tracking, that's going to put us in a better apples-to-apples comparison standpoint with the other channels that we compete against. And so, yes, it would definitely be a huge help.
Definitely. So we've looked at where we came from. Where are we headed as an industry in the next 2 years? What should we keep an eye out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think still that definition, right, and seeing where that piece is, right. I still think the space is going to stay open, just because I think it creates a lot more kind of optionality, for lack of a better term, for creators and shows, and being on as many platforms as possible, I think does really make it special. We're obviously still seeing a rise of programmatic, right. A lot of times we talk about with clients of kind of more the influencer influencer side of things and the audience side of things. For most clients, it's not normally one or the other. It's normally a mix of both, depending on clients' goals, needs. It could be a lot of different reasons, for that, right? And we still think, actually, one thing that I get asked all the time too is, well, is it still the top players? It's really important to think about, one, the entire ecosystem in terms of the partners that are out here, right? The other thing to really think about is, hey, this truly is a separate, podcasting is a super ad tech ecosystem, right? And that if you're really getting into podcasting, making sure that you take advantage of the players that are unique to audio, because they're going to help you. There are a lot of gaps in obviously the audio ad tech ecosystem elsewhere in terms of both measurement, brand suitability, stuff of that sort, right? And so making sure that you have the same level of measurement and brand suitability you have in audio and podcasting as you do in other channels.
Right, definitely a unique space.
Yeah.
So if you're talking to a buyer who's got $1 that could go to Meta or CTV or podcasting, what's the argument for podcasting?
I mean, I think it's truly becoming more and more the future of digital content, right? And that, hey, you buy $1 in Meta, it goes to potentially there's a whole world that's out there, right? But that, hey, you can really make, particularly there are so many podcasts that have so many great fans, right? You can really make an impact in a lot of, more, specific areas.
Right. All right. Well, I think we're at time. So thank you, Bob, for anybody in the audience. We appreciate it. Yeah, feel free to find us afterwards. So,
Thanks you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob.